Funny people like Mel Brooks have been around for a long time. The man you see is 98 years old. He has lived longer than his wife, his best friends, and almost everyone in his age. He should be the person who makes everyone laugh. The person who ate dinner on trays with Rob Reiner every night and watched Jeopardy until the very end. But there was no laughter when the cameras found him yesterday outside the quiet, remote home where he has spent the last few years living sort of like he was retired. There wasn't a joke to bring everyone together. There was only one man, and he looked like the whole century had finally fallen on his shoulders. The news about Rob Reiner has been all over the place for days. The brutality of the crime, the fact that his son Nick was arrested, and the shock of seeing a Hollywood family fall apart in one night of violence. But while the news reporters talked about court dates and police reports, Mel Brooks didn't say a word. And that quiet was the loudest thing in town, because everyone knows Mel wasn't just best friends with Rob's dad. He was like Rob's second dad. His name was Uncle Mel. He was the one who changed Rob's diaper. This is the person who helped him become one of the most recognized directors in the world from a meathead. But when Mel finally let one trusted reporter into his living room, no. There were no cameras, just a tape recorder, and people started talking. It wasn't a news release. And it was an admission. What he said changes everything we thought we knew about what took place in that Brentwood house. Mel didn't talk about the killings right away. He began by speaking about shame. He was sitting in his couch with weak hands. It wasn't because he was getting old, it was because he had been holding back anger for years. People are calling it a disaster, a sudden manic episode, and a terrible accident, he said. This wasn't an accident. And it wasn't sudden, Mel said with wet, sharp eyes. We didn't tell Rob he was wrong because we loved him too much. For 10 years, we watched this bad car accident happen slowly. This part hurts to hear. Mel Brooks, who is known for being kind, said that the people closest to Rob and Michelle, who loved them deeply, knew Nick Reiner was a time bomb. But Mel doesn't paint a picture of a monster that appeared out of thin air. It shows parents whose love turned out to be the thing that killed them. Mel talked about a certain afternoon that happened about 6 months ago. It was Sunday. Rob went to Mel's house, just like his dad Carl used to do. That is, Rob wasn't eating. He kept moving. Mel said that Rob was like a man who was being chased in his own home. He told Mel that Nick had come back to the Brentwood house after another failed attempt at rehab. This time, though, things were different. They still called him the boy, even though he was a guy in his 30s. The boy wasn't just using again. He was kidding himself. That man was mean. Rob told Mel that he now locks the door to his bedroom at night. Take a look at that. Rob Reiner turned his back on his own son, even though he built his whole life and public image around the ideas of communication, family, and openness. Mel asked Rob why he didn't call the cops and get a restraining order. Rob gave her an answer that still echoes through Mel's living room. I promised, he said. Michelle, I wouldn't give up on him. If I kick him out, he dies on the street. If I keep him here, I might be able to save him, Mel said again, slamming his hand on the chair. He told Rob he yelled at him. He told him he wasn't going to save his son. He had a threat inside him. But Rob wouldn't give up. He had that RER. It was his stubbornness that made him a great director. That kind of determination that makes you keep trying until you get the perfect shot. But when that stubbornness was used on a volatile user, it killed them. It's not just the violence that makes Mel's news shocking. It was the theft of money that came before it. We've all seen the movies, The Net Worth, and Castle Rock Kingdom. We think that money can fix everything. Mel said that Rob and Michelle had been mentally and financially drained by the situation for the past 2 years. This wasn't because they were broke, but because the extortion was constant. Nick asked for more than money. He wanted it to get back at people who he thought had hurt him as a child. Mel talked about the money Nick wanted as compensation, using the family's liberal and accepting views against them by saying that Nick's pain needed millions of dollars in getting paid. It's a terrifyingly clear way to trick people. Mel said that Rob would come to him with tears in his eyes and show him hateful text messages in which Nick blamed Rob for everything, from his drug use to his failed job. Still, Rob would buy him a car the next day. Rob would pay for a place to live. Rob would give money to a project. It was called the Hollywood by Mel. Illness, the idea that you can make things better if you just put enough resources into them. Rob thought he could help his son get better like he did with The Princess Bride. He thought the script would change if he just set the scene right and made sure there was enough light and help. But life isn't a play. And Mel Brooks, who knows more about how tragedies work than anyone else because he knows more about how comedies work, saw it. The third act is coming. He told the interviewer about a time last year around Christmas. It was a small, close-knit meeting. Nick was there. The air was tight, like a wire that's about to break. Mel watched Nick as he watched his dad. He said it didn't look like a kid. It was the look of a hunter looking at its prey. Rob told a joke at one point. Everyone laughed at this famous Rob Reiner joke about himself, except Nick. Nick did nothing but stare. In the evening, Mel took Rob aside. The talk that has kept Mel up at night since the news came out is this one. Rob was grabbed by Mel's shoulder. He made this point clear by moving his body while telling the story, like the Robbie, you need to get him out. He doesn't look at you with love, he looks at you with ownership. And Rob, sweet and smart Rob, pulled away. He was hurt by it. He said to Mel, "You sound like the critics. You don't know him like I do. He's in pain." This is when Mel broke down in tears. He cried over the boy he had seen grow up. The kid who used to play with Carl Reiner on the floor turned into a man who couldn't tell the difference between loving someone and making them happy. Mel thinks he failed. He thinks it's his duty to guard the legacy since he is the last of that great generation of Jewish comedians and the patriarch. He also failed because he didn't call the cops himself. But the shocking information Mel gave wasn't about the past. It was about the murder night. The cops have given a very clear timeline. When they died, how they got in, and where their bodies are. It was hours before, though, and Mel knows because Rob called him. It was already late. Mel was already sound asleep. It rang, and Mel wasn't sure what to do. He almost didn't answer. Rob's voice was barely audible when he did. He wasn't calling to talk. He called to say goodbye, but he didn't say anything. Rob told Mel that he's going badly again. He is yelling about the will. He thinks we're ignoring him. He was told to leave by Mel. "Robin, get in the car. Drive. Welcome." This is the line that makes everyone gasp. That one line turns this into a Greek tragedy from a crime story. Rob answered, "I can't leave Michelle. She's with him in the room trying to calm him down. If I do, he'll blame her for everything." Rob Reiner stayed in that house even though he knew it was dangerous and unstable because he wouldn't leave his wife with the monster they had made together. He went back into the room to keep her safe. Mel Brooks didn't hear his voice again after that. Nick is portrayed by the media as a completely crazy person, but Mel says we need to understand the anger. He talked about the shadow, both Carl Reiner's and Rob Reiner's. If you're not strong enough to carry it, being the third generation in a family where the first two generations are legendary can be very heavy. Nick had a voice and ability, but he only wanted the praise and not the work. He blamed the shadow when the business world didn't bend to his will. Rob was too big, he said. He was sure that Rob's success was taking away his happiness. It's a mental break that Mel has seen in this town before, but never this bad. He said it was like a rot. It's not obvious. The Brentwood house looked great. The gardens were well kept. It's possible that the Christmas decorations were up or being set up. On the inside, though, the rot had eaten through the base. Mel also said she was very angry at the ways to help the family. He said that the threat was downplayed by therapists, doctors, and experts who worked for the company. It was pros who told Rob and Michelle that harsh love was out of date and that they should try radical acceptance instead. Mel called these people her friends. He said that they used Rob's money to tell him what he wanted to hear, which was that his son was only sick and not dangerous. The danger was stopped. They gave these suicidal thoughts medical names. Mel said in a low growl, they told him it was a disorder. They did not tell him it was a death sentence. Hence Mel's speech right now. The trial doesn't bother him, he says. He knows that the trial is not important. There is a lot of proof. He wants to know the truth about his friend's life. Rob is not what he wants. People will remember you as a victim of a chance crime. He wants people to remember him as a man who died of a broken heart before he was cut. He really wants everyone to know that Rob gave up everything to be the father he thought his son needed. Mel's story makes us think. It makes us think about how far parental love can go. People often say, I would die for my children. Rob Reiner pushed that idea to its limit. He died, but his son wasn't saved, which Mel thinks is sad. It only sealed his son's fate. As the talk came to an end, Mel became quiet. That night, he looked around his room, which was full of things from Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and pictures of his late wife and Braftoft. He looked like a man who was stuck on an island of memories. He said the anger is no longer the hardest part. It's the quiet. The phone doesn't ring. There's no longer a Sunday dinner. There is no longer a way to connect to Carl. He said in a whisper, I'm the last one. I have to accept that I saw it coming. He talked about the funeral plans, which are being kept secret. He said he was going to talk there and not tell any jokes. That's what he plans to do, tell the truth. The business world needs to hear it. He wants all of Hollywood's famous dads and rich moms to stop lying to themselves and look at their sick kids. He wants Rob's death to be a terrible wake-up call that says, you can't love someone into not being violent. Mel Brooks has spent his whole life making us laugh at the stupidities of the world, like Hitler, racism, and even death itself. But he can't see what's funny. In this is not comedy. There is only the harsh truth of a family that is broken on the inside. Mel grabbed the reporter's arm as he got ready to leave. He was eager to get his message across and had one last thing to say. Maybe to clear the air, or maybe to let other people know. He talked about the facilitators once more. He said, it was said that Nick had a group of friends who fed his fantasies, used Rob's money to party, and made Nick even more angry. Mel wants them to be found out. In his words, Nick held the weapon, but many people worked on making the blade sharp. We've never seen Mel Brooks like this before. Take a look at the showman. This person is the witness. And what he said is terrible. It takes away the glitz of the RER's history and shows the real, painful human cost. It helps us remember that these are just people behind the walls of Brentwood and the awards and praise. People who hurt others, make mistakes, and love without thinking twice. Listen to the whole story when you read about Nick Reiner's trial in January and see him in that orange jumpsuit. Do you remember Mel Brooks sitting in? 98 years old, crying over the little boy he used to bounce on his knee and the best friend he couldn't save. Keep in mind that the truth isn't always as easy to find as a police record. The truth is a past of small decisions, ignored warnings, and doors left open because you couldn't stand to shut them on your own blood. Mel's quiet has been broken, and it will be heard for a very long time. We get a chill when we think about the fact that even people who write the happiest ends for the rest of some of us have to go through the hardest times ourselves. Rob Reiner's death is more than just a crime story. The man who has seen everything speaks out about the limits of love. He wishes more than anything that he hadn't seen this. There was a heavy sigh at the end of the conversation instead of a bang. That was when Mel looked out the window again. The sun in California was too bright for the day. He looked. His will was strong, but he was weak. He no longer needs to keep the lies. He's done keeping the picture safe. The truth is now safe with him. Mel Brooks says that Rob Reiner didn't really die. He was overwhelmed by the life he had worked so hard to grow. And that's a tragedy that can't be fixed by time or laughs. Now it's up to us to Take some time to think about this and look at our own families and secrets. It was very hard for Mel Brooks to do what he did. He told a beautiful man the ugly truth about himself. And that's why we should pay attention. If Mel Brooks, who is dying, feels the need to scream this warning, we would be stupid to ignore it. Hollywood is very sad about the death of Rob Reiner. But what his death taught us, as told to him by his best friend, could be the only thing that stops it from happening again. The trial has been set, and the probe is still going on. But in Mel Brooks's eyes, the decision has already been given. The system failed, the doctors failed, and so did the love, that beautiful, limitless RER love. The end is harsh, but it's the only one Mel has left. This is the one we all have now. This story should stay with you as the new cycle starts, as it always does. A picture of an old man in a quiet room holding the weight of the end of a dynasty. When you think about it, success doesn't protect you from anything, not pain, not betrayal, and most definitely not the people you bring into the world. Even though Rob Reiner's movies will live on, this last sad lesson in the complexity of the human heart will also live on thanks to Mel Brooks. There is no longer any quiet. The shock is real, and the truth is much worse than any fiction. No matter how painful it is, this is the story that Mel Brooks and we all needed to hear. Because in the end, only the truth can honor the dead, and Mel Brooks has honored Rob Reiner in the only way that he is left, by refusing to let his death be a lie. Maybe change the way it's formatted or recap it. What else do you want me to do with this text? For you?